Well, I am Mick McKellar from McKellar, and I'm glad that I actually took a few notes and put them down, because there's been that much information here this morning and crosses over with a lot of learnings and so forth. Met Brendan Smart. He tells me that he's going to go to sleep in this session, so Brendan, doze off, because he said that I couldn't talk about drought, I couldn't talk about anything negative to do with the tree clearing issues here in Queensland, nor negative markets. Pretty well, I've been sitting down writing notes ever since. No, not really. Where are they now? Oh, gosh. If we get this to work, we will know. Which button? Okay. So I'm going to start with the last bit first. I want to talk about my editor-in-chief, friend and partner in business, my wife Helen. So when I say I, it's not really I, it's more us. So at the moment we're in a holding pattern and losing altitude rather quickly. We're in the midst of about a 4-year pretty severe drought. But the last bit first, for me, is the common question that I get asked the most, which is what you have done after you completed your Nuffield Scholarship. For me, it was getting involved with Nuffield. It was taking positions as Treasurer, State Chairman, chairing the State Selection Panel, and of course for those unfortunate that had to sit on the other side, I used to ask the old question about the 3 things that Nuffield Scholarship would do for you, your community, and what you were going to give back to your industry. I think Nuffield has been a great development program for myself and many people. It's been great for me to be involved with it because it's allowed me to have those experiences where you interview someone, you encourage them to, if they weren't successful, to come back. And believe me, I had 3 goes before I got over the line. But it's also really, really invigorating when you see someone that's been interviewed, they've been nervous, they've been successful with their scholarship, and just in 12 months, the growth in that individual person. So I've always had a passion after had the experience to try and encourage other people to share in this Nuffield experience. Because as everybody knows, Nuffield isn't just about taking, it's about giving back to your industry, as I said before, giving back to your community and your family. And I think that's where it leads into for us. It's been not only just about our business and so forth, we're fairly community-minded, get involved. My wife's heavily involved in pony club and instructing kids in horse riding. I tend to take on other roles in the community that sometimes probably need psychology. After I finished my Nuffield Scholarship, to answer the question about what have I done, I realised I had to lift my own game. So I had to build stronger networks and ties. And even during my scholarship, that started because I actually changed banks and went with Rabobank. And it's a whole story in itself. So during my scholarship, I was probably one of the first scholars, much to some discussion I had with Brian Clark at the time, broke my scholarship and came home in the middle. And there were a couple of reasons for that. Things weren't going so well on the home front with management of the property, and my dad was really sick, and unfortunately he passed away not long afterwards. However, that gave an opportunity that I believe now lots of scholars now share in, because it was traditional that you had to spend your 16 weeks. That being said, we then went on with Rabo. So when I came home, I'd actually been part of a regional beef research committee, and we'd organised a meat profit day in Longreach. So this sort of blows your head a bit. So I meet a lady there that's working for Rabo in New York. So I get talking to her, get talking to the local Rabo bank manager at the time, Craig Swalling, and Swall says, "Oh yeah, I'll write you a letter." Okay, that's good, Swall. So next thing, I'm a client. a fly over to the Netherlands. When you come from downtown Augathella and you walk up to the bank in Utrecht and it takes up 2 blocks, it's pretty impressive. So Rabo actually organised 10 days of travel for me over there, even though I was a very new client. So that's where our association started. And of course, being a grade 10 educated scholar, I had a fair bit of learning to do. So we started with the self-development programs when we got home, and they included leadership roles in the community and business, as I said before, but it was about building those business platforms and also the literacy, financial literacy that we needed to develop. So from there, we developed those tight linkages. We're part of groups within our community that are industry focused, benchmarking groups or business development groups. So I think all those things have, because of our study and so forth, helped us go around and put ourselves in a better position. There wouldn't be a Nuffield Scholar that has travelled that hasn't seen $1 million idea. But the trick with it all is to come home and implement it with a $5 budget. It's actually ironic I stand here today, some 14 years after completing my scholarship, and not much has really changed. We're still in drought. This is the only interpretation here in Queensland that we often talk about, continual drought with the occasional thunderstorm. Well, we haven't been interrupted by that thunderstorm, I can assure you. My study topic was on water medication, water quality and its impact on livestock production. However, my real passion is for environmental stewardship and regenerative farming that delivers economic and financial outcomes with social benefits for our rural and regional communities. So the first thing I did when I came home was stop my water medication. So that sounds a bit funny, but the findings when I eventually put it all together was so conclusive for me that I had more benefits in my business than they just outweighed it. So the things that happened that I found out, a really simple message is about the solubility of the nutrients that we were putting through the water. It's about the suspension and it's about the benefit at the other end. And we had I thought we had a lot of polypipe in those days. We had 14 kilometres, had delivery points, probably the furthest delivery point from where the distribution point was probably 5 kilometres. Well, then we sort of got a bit serious about things and we talked about developing the place. So this is where we live in Western Queensland. It's 750 kilometres just about due west of Brisbane, even though that map doesn't show that. And that's our property, Booker. So we just have a few aerial shots. So the first couple of things we did was we had to build a house. Well, that was okay, but then I had to cut the timber, mill the timber, get the carpenter, do all that sort of stuff. It's a bit like what comes first. So we came home, did that. We put in whole new water systems, and we had to develop the property, pulling scrub, all that stuff. Sorry, Smarty. And then we built sheds, do all the infrastructure stuff, because part of the focus was to add value to the asset. I had this new partner called Rabo, and I'm quite sure that they needed their new client to have a bit of security for them. So we put in new fences, new yards, the whole deal. So eventually we got about, that's just taken a little 14 years. I got a little distraction on the way where we got into diversification into desert limes. So I'm not quite sure. I think the original advice I was given by a horticulturalist was that I needed a brain transplant. I think they were pretty well on the money. So this has been both rewarding and very, very much taxing little venture that we've gone into. When someone pioneers something and then you come along after them. Sometimes the pioneering's probably not as great a trail blazed as what you think. So we buy in the rootstock, we graft it, we grow it, we propagate it as in keep it in a nursery for 12 months, and then we plant it out. So the fruit's only as big as your thumbnail, but it's there's a lucrative market, and it's just one of those things that has eluded us at the moment, is to get what we call a wild harvest, and that can usually come about if you can get early summer rains. Also had an interest in Belmont red cattle. So better genetics from Belmont red cattle. So they're a breed of cattle that came out of an industry request in the 1950s and were developed by the CSIRO. They're a tropically adapted beast that had docility, fertility, and carcass yield and meat quality. Even just as recently as 2016, Josie and Blair Angus have just won a silver medal with a Belmont Red Cross at the World Championship Meat Awards. I've had a little bit to do with representation and industry and research. So the point I want to make here is you can be involved in a lot of things in the industry and do a lot of things. However, what can happen is that once you get educated, no one wants to have you. And that's what happened to me with Nuffield. So before I did my Nuffield, I was on regional beef research committees, I was on this, that. And when I came home, I can tell you, I couldn't buy a ticket. So that was probably a good thing because it allowed me to work in my business. We all heard Mike Gearing talk yesterday about AgForce and what's going on. This morning we've just had a presentation, and I'm going to labour the point here a little bit, about reconnecting the industry and teachers teaching ag and so forth. I'll tell you a little story. So I went off and did my Nuffield, and there's a program running in the UK called LEAF, Linking Environment and Farming Together. So I had a few contacts in AgForce because I was in the old Cattlemen's Union, and we then amalgamated with the UGA and the grain farmers, and that's how AgForce came about. So I was part of the Cattle Council at that time on the Cattlemen's Union. So I knew a few people that were on the board, Peter Kenny and the like, and I said, Pete, we've got an opportunity here. We can put together a three-prong approach, because my belief is we need Jane Bennett with branding. We need to be branded. So AgForce had it. They had what we called every family needed a farmer. So there's 6 elements to it. So that was all good. So I thought if we developed a pro forma so that every individual person could just have it, and we would focus on those 6 elements. So from memory, we were business owners, we were food producers, we were researchers, we were environmentalists, we were family. Oh, the other one escapes me. But, so we did all this, we developed it up, and then we had that. Then I said, look, we also just need to be able to take a piece of paper that people can use, and they can just use it on their farm, but they can address in their own way, their own words, those 6 elements. And then we were talking about getting funds and developing an interactive game. So this is back, this is back, not last century, but it's 2007 probably. So we took that back to the industry, back to the members. And I said, oh, no, we don't want to do that. But the challenge that I put out here to Nuffield and myself and what have you, and our little story at home is, when we get people coming to our place, particularly our family members, that's where we started, was with our family members, because I believe that's another learning, is we all want to get these people that are in Queen Street here. No. Bring it back to what people we can influence. So I've got relatives here in Brisbane. They come out every Easter time. So we have the little country blurb. So the influence of that now is when those guys go with their wives and take people out to a restaurant, they buy MSA graded meat because they now understand what it's all about. And that's just a small example. I'm sure that, each and every person that's in the room produces good food. So I've got a few photos there. It's not what I tell you today, it's what I don't tell you really. But anyway, the idea of those slides is just to show you the variation in the seasons that everybody knows that we have here in Queensland. During the last 14 years, we also fit in a bit of play. I got some photos there of some time I spent up in the Kimberley. I did a month of volunteer work with some rock art survey. And then my son and I, back 10 years ago, went over to New Guinea and walked the Kokoda track, all of which was pretty interesting. We just talked about Ian Hill over in Brazil before. Well, I was, as Jane said, I was part of the Brazilian tour that we did over there, and the continued learning that Nuffield offers. I think it's just an amazing opportunity for the alumni if they want to engage with continued learning. This is the group. So we've got Rob Fisher, he's a Zimbabwean, Mike Brady, he's an Irishman, myself, Peter Draper, who else? Oh, and we've got Barry Cudmore, and our wives, of course. So Barry Cudmore, he was from Canada. The point I really want to make here is the network that we've got is so strong, and I don't think that we actually use it enough. I don't think that we actually understand the value of what it is. I keep in touch with these guys all over the world, as most of us do. But it's quite uplifting when you're in the middle of a drought and you get, some of these guys ring you and say, "Look, Mick, how you going? What's going on?" And I think that, part of that networking, mental health's a big issue that we talk about all the time here in Australia. However, it's I think it's easy for people just to jump on Facebook or whatever and tap a few things, but there's nothing better than being personal. So everybody can read that, but I think the last little bit of a message I want to talk about is Nuffield's the only vehicle, the only group organisation that I know of that has all of agriculture under the one roof at the one time. Mick Keogh told us that there's 96 advocacy groups in Australia. I think it's time that we fill the space and we step up and do the job that agriculture needs, because I think that statement right there tells it all. Thank you.